Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a really pivotal, honestly heartbreaking moment of forced maturity. We're going to explore exactly what happens when the Starks have to completely abandon their childhood wishes and just face a brutal world exactly as it is. It's essentially a masterclass in shifting perspectives, right as everyone is teetering on the edge of war. The innocence of youth isn't just fading away here, it's being systematically stripped away and replaced by the massive, terrifying burdens of leadership and simple survival.
Right off the bat, we start with Bran Stark's incredibly devastating internal realization of his new physical limits. After surviving that terrifying attack in the Wolfswood, the whole illusion of his independence is just completely shattered. He actually reflects on this with deep shame, thinking he'd been as helpless as a baby. Actually, scratch that, he thinks he was less than a baby, figuring even his toddler brother Rickon would have at least kicked at their attackers. I mean, think about it. Just a year ago, this was a kid who could scale the massive walls of Winterfell and knock princes into the dirt with a wooden sword. But now, he's literally strapped to a wicker basket on the back of the stable boy Hodor. Bran has to confront his physical state, not as he desperately wishes it to be, but exactly as it is.
And really, this is the core question we're going to explore today. What happens when a child is forced to face a brutal world exactly as it is? We're going to analyze how these comfortable, warm illusions of magic, guaranteed safety, and glorious heroism are just torn away from the Stark kids. When the fairy tales fall apart, what's actually left? How do you survive when the world stops playing by the rules of songs and legends and instead demands harsh, absolutely uncompromising choices?
Chapter 1: The Stark Reality. Okay, let's take a look at the sheer scale of what is amassing at Winterfell.
12,000 men. Just let that number sink in for a second. That's the size of the Northern Army gathered at the castle. Winterfell has been completely transformed from this quiet island of peace into a chaotic, crowded, and honestly dangerous war camp. The winter town is absolutely full to bursting. The yard is just ringing non-stop with the sound of swords and axes, and the air itself is thick with the sweat of armorers and the fear of horses. The sheer logistical weight of this new reality is overwhelming. Like, if they don't march soon, this massive host is going to eat the entire surrounding countryside clean. So Bran is watching all of this from above through Maester Luwin's bronze viewing tube, and he's learning to recognize these fierce lords who are answering the call. And let me tell you, these guys are definitely not the shining, chivalrous knights from the Southern songs. They are a stark reality. We're talking about the mailed fist of the Glovers, the completely terrifying flayed man of the Boltons, and the roaring giant and shattered chains of the Umbers. We even see the Karstarks marching into the booming of this massive drum, wearing literal bear and wolf pelts. These men are fierce, they're wild, and they pretty much entirely reject the Southern traditions of knighthood. This is the massive, untamed reality of the war that's coming. Now, what's really fascinating here is the intense duality of Robb Stark's forced maturation. To the Lords of the North, he has to project this absolute, totally unshakable authority. He's out there answering seasoned battle commanders with this cool courtesy, basically bending them to his will, and he isn't even 16 years old yet. But in private, when he comes to Bran's bedchamber late at night, the whole facade completely drops. We see Robb the boy. He's pale, he's shaken, and he confesses just how terrified he is, wishing so deeply that his father was there to take this burden away. He is playing this high-stakes role simply because reality demands it of him.
This tension finally hits a boiling point when Robb is forced to prove his authority in a genuinely terrifying confrontation with the massive Greatjon Umber. The Greatjon actually draws his sword in anger, which is flat-out treason, but Robb doesn't panic. He issues this calm, icy warning, and boom, in the blink of an eye, his direwolf Greywind lunges and bites off two of the Greatjon's fingers. It's a brutal, incredibly bloody scene, but it perfectly shows that Robb understands he has to play the part of a ruthless leader to survive. And astonishingly, the Greatjon just laughs at his own maiming and becomes Robb's fiercest champion. Robb has successfully navigated the political world exactly as it is.
But hold on a second. While Robb is successfully uniting his banners and getting ready to march south against the Lannisters, we need to shift our attention over to the Godswood. Because while this political war is dominating everyone's attention, a completely ignored and far deadlier reality is quietly revealing itself in the shadows. Down beneath the weirwood tree, the captive wildling Osha gives Bran this absolutely chilling warning. She scoffs at all these southern wars and the sheer ignorance of men who have never tasted a true winter. She tells him about the rising cold winds and the dead who return as whites with blue eyes and cold black hands. She explicitly says that Robb is marching the wrong way. He should literally be taking his swords north. And this just highlights such a tragic irony, right? The entire strength of the North is marching away to fight a war of politics, completely turning their backs on the apocalyptic threat rising in the ice. They are fighting the war they want to fight, not the war exactly as it is.
And you can see how this just drains Bran's hope, especially when you look at the devastating historical pattern of House Stark. As Bran is processing Robb leaving, he traces this dark, terrifying timeline. His grandfather Rickard rode south and never returned. His uncle Brandon rode south and never returned. His father Ned went south and is now sitting in a cell, and his mother Catelyn has vanished into all these southern conflicts too. And now, Robb is adding his own name to that exact same grim list. The pattern is just undeniable.
And while Bran is wrestling with the totally valid fear of losing his brother, he gets this violent reminder of his own diminished place in this harsh society. Because he can't ride out and fight with the army, Bran has to sit at the head of the feast. And there, he overhears the cruel whispers of the Karstark brothers. They're muttering that they'd sooner die than live as a cripple, literally calling him broken inside as well as out. It is a stunningly callous assessment of Bran's worth in a culture that values physical strength above pretty much everything else.
So Bran is violently forced to confront this new, entirely unwanted identity, Bran the Broken. He desperately whispers to Maester Luwin that he doesn't want to be broken. He wants to be a knight. He wants to learn magic from the children of the forest so he can fly. But Luwin, being the voice of pure, pragmatic reality, gently shuts all of that down. He offers to teach Bran history, healing, castle building, the practical tools of the mind. But he insists that no man can teach magic and that the children of the forest are long, long gone. Bran's desperate desire for a magical fix is dismissed as pure folly. He has to accept his body and his world exactly as it is.
The dam finally breaks when Robb actually rides out to war. The imagery here is striking. You have Robb looking glorious on his gray stallion, cloak streaming, lances glinting in the sun, leading the absolute might of the North. But the emotional toll is just devastating behind the scenes. Their youngest brother, Rickon, is wild with grief. He's hiding in the castle, totally refusing to say goodbye, screaming that no one ever comes back. And Bran, strapped to his pony, can only sit there and watch them go, harboring this terrible secret knowledge from Osha that they are all marching the wrong way.
As the cheers from the townsfolk for Lord Stark slowly fade into the distance, this profound, heavy silence falls over the castle. Bran is left entirely alone to rule. He looks around and realizes that all the strength, all the young men, all the fierce protectors, they're all gone. He is left with only women, children, old men, and the simple-minded Hodor. The inescapable emptiness of his grim new reality finally settles in. Winterfell, which was just bustling with 12,000 soldiers, now feels completely deserted and dead.
Which brings us to this final, pretty unsettling thought to leave you with. With the entire martial strength of the North marching south to play the perilous Game of Thrones, and the real, supernatural threat up north being completely ignored, what hope actually remains? When the heroes abandon their posts to fight the wrong war, who is actually left to face the true winter? Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer.